Well, we're heading down to the studio.
Again.
Yeah, this time we're going down there to get some old equipment.
Yeah.
We've had it set up in the editing room, and Brian has decided he wants to do something with this particular editing room, and since we haven't been using it as an editing room now in months,
Yeah.
probably more like a year. Yeah.
Years.
We figured, well, we'll bring all that equipment home since we're doing all our editing from home anyway. We don't need the editing room down there. So we're bringing these old video decks, and these are video recorders that I used to use back in the 80s and the 90s to shoot video. I'd run all over the place, sometimes with Mike Niederhauser and some other people, and shoot video of every darn thing imaginable as long as it was a train that ran on steam. And then I'd generally go shoot some video of it.
Gee.
And released those as Madame Wu video, and did 2 shows for PBS on steam trains called Ghost Trains of the Old West.
Wow.
And, we just had a lot of fun. But I shot tons and tons of video, and the weird thing is, didn't really use all of it in these shows. So there's a whole
Serious?
bunch of stuff, hundreds of tapes. We're going to haul it to the house and hook it up there. And I'm going to start an impossible task of going through all this old videotape from the 80s and 90s and digitizing it, and we'll start using it here in the show. Because back in the 80s and 90s, I was going all over the place with these old style cameras, huge monster.
Well, women had big hair too back then.
Well, big hair. Oh, and I had a big microphone. Yes, about 3 feet long microphone. Actually, I had access to all kinds of really neat microphones. So the sound on these tapes is amazing. The problem is video just wasn't up to much back then. It was all standard definition. And boy, you look at it, you know, back in the day we thought it was great. Now you look at it and you go, ugh, really see that?
Checkerboard.
But in spite of that, I've got all this just amazing footage. So I want to show you some of this footage, and I'm going to dive in there and start digitizing all this stuff because I've got hours and hours and hours
It's
of
cool
steam
stuff.
trains.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just steam trains. So
love
it's
a
really,
train.
really cool. So
Yeah.
check this out.
Well, we sure had a lot of fun back in those days. The bearded character here is Mike Niederhauser, and he and I used to go all over shooting video. Sometimes attending organized events, but more often than not bootlegging over a fence. We used to put those tapes out on VHS, remember VHS, as Madame Wu video. They're out there now on DVD, but they still look like VHS, of course. But they're on eBay and in some of the hobby shops. Well, the old video certainly looks like old video, but the subject matter, oh my gosh, the subject matter, just beautiful. And while the picture quality leaves a bit to be desired, the sound quality is just amazing. Okay, this was a really fun event. This was a private charter on the Cumbres and Toltec Railroad in 1988. It was organized by a guy named Jim Trowbridge of Denver, Colorado. He would repaint the locomotive back to Rio Grande paint job and then sell tickets to about 12 people who would be willing to ride on the freight train just for the purposes of getting out there and taking film and video. Okay, now here's something you don't see every day. In fact, you never see it. This engine is painted for the Pueblo and Chama Railroad. Well, that was the railroad that pulled the circus train in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And we commandeered their locomotive. That's because we ran our locomotive out of coal and we needed some. So we grabbed the locomotive as it came by and stole about a ton of coal off of it just to use. But then when we got back to Antonito, we stole the whole locomotive and train because I wanted to get footage of Steven Spielberg's Circus train, which I've got. And speaking of things you don't see every day, this is something you could have only seen in 1987. Some people relayed a small section of the Colorado Southern at Central City, Colorado, and they were running Colorado Southern number 71 on that track. But unfortunately, it only ran for a very short period. The bear trap spark arrestor on this locomotive really produces an unusual sound. Check that out. A lot of the locals up at Central City had come up with the absolutely not brilliant idea to legalize gambling in an effort to revive their economy. And yes, they did, and a lot of big casinos moved in and pretty much ruined everything they came in contact with, including the Colorado Southern Railroad. There were two, count them two, back-to-back absolutely amazing railroad events in the early 1990s. In 1991, we saw Rail Fair in Sacramento, California, and then in 1992, the National Railroad Historical Society held an amazing convention in the Bay Area. In San Francisco, they were running special cable cars for the convention, as well as chartered runs of the antique trolleys on the F-line. And speaking of antique trolleys, over in San Jose, they had opened the car shops to convention goers, and they were running 4 restored antique trolleys on their line as well. But the big deal at the convention were the 4 giant steam locomotives, Southern Pacific 4449 and 2472, and the Union Pacific had sent in 844 as well as the Challenger 3985. The Southern Pacific engines were running on the San Francisco Peninsula. The Union Pacific engines were running through the East Bay, and connections between the 2 tracks were being done with cable car and trolley. What could get better than that? Okay, speaking of the Challenger, feast your eyes on the Challenger running in 1990 in Salt Lake City. And here we have the Challenger in its stomping grounds, climbing Sherman Hill in 1992 for the Union Pacific Historical Society Convention. Okay, now this is impressive, isn't it? This is the Challenger in Bear River Canyon, Utah, as it navigates around Cutler Dam. Currently, the Union Pacific is rebuilding the Big Boy locomotive in Cheyenne, and we've got 3 shows up on that subject so far. But in this case, you'd really have to look twice to tell if you're looking at a Big Boy or a Challenger. They're extremely similar locomotives. Okay, this is fun. Karen and I went to the Grand Canyon Railway, and we've got that great show up on that. But back in 1992, they were running exclusively steam. These days, they hardly ever run that. They have their steam engines on display at various places along the line, but only for very special events do they fire any of them up. Well, the Grand Canyon hasn't changed at all since then. Same old canyon, different day. The ride out to the Grand Canyon is still an amazing thing and well worth doing. But dang, I miss the steam engines.
So what were you doing in the 1980s?
Oh my gosh, chasing Bubba's around.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, Christy, who's soon 32 years old, she was little Bubba's right then.
I'm out filming trains and
I'm chasing Bubba's.
you're chasing Bubba's.
Oh boy, was I chasing Bubba's.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing we didn't run into each other back then.
I bet you we did somewhere along the line.
I'm sure, well, we did at that one Radfink reunion, and I tried to sell you that chair.
Oh, you really were trying to get me to buy that then. So that's why I gave you the blow off.
Well, sure.
I knew it.
Well, you wanted high heel shoes, and
I
I just
know.
knew you wouldn't look good in them, so I wanted you to buy the
for
chair.
my daughter, I don't wear high heels. My daughter does.
So our paths kept crossing,
Oh, I'll say.
even back then,
Yeah.
and it's just fun.
Yeah.
I've got an interview. I sat down for about an hour with Big Daddy.
Yeah.
And he talked about building all the cars and the
Wow.
Mysterian and the Beatnik Bandit and coming up with Rat Fink and how
Oh my
he came up
goodness.
with the idea and why he joined the Mormon Church and moved
yeah.
to Manti
Yeah,
and
there you go.
his whole life story. And he just went off, and
Yeah.
I had the big camera set up, so I've got all that.
Nice.
I recorded a thing with Robert Richardson, who had the
Oh.
Narrow Gauge Motel in Alamosa, and that became the Colorado Railroad Museum.
Yeah.
And he goes into why he bought steam engines, how he bought steam engines, what the Rio Grande's position was, why he started the motel, how that evolved into the Colorado Railroad Museum. So that's just fascinating
That's crazy fun.
interview with him. Never mind, shot a lot of video at that museum, shot at Georgetown Loop, Durango Silverton,
Nice.
Cumbres Toltec, all kinds of places, just all kinds of places, just amazing footage.
Wow.
Got footage of the Manitou and Pikes Peak
Oh, wow.
running steam
Wow.
up Pikes Peak, because they've kept one of their steam engines, and they've kept one example of all their old equipment. And I've got all of that, including the steam engine,
Gee.
going up the side of Pikes Peak. So that's
crazy.
that's cool.
Wow.
Went out and snuck onto the set of earlier in the tape. You saw sneaking onto the set of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade to get video of their circus train, but also snuck onto the set of Geronimo to get Great Western Sugar number 75
Oh my gosh.
in that movie, and the movie cars that they made for that and everything, and spent a couple of days on their set sneaking around getting all manner of video about
kidding, geez.
that.
Yeah.
The 2-foot gauge High Country Railroad before it closed down.
Gosh.
Riding around in an actual Sandy River and Rangeley Lakes 2-foot gauge passenger car.
Oh my.
All original, all authentic, riding around in Colorado of all places on a New England Maine Railroad passenger car. And one of the big things is Eureka and Palisades number 4.
Oh really?
Dan Markoff's engine.
That's the cutest little engine.
Everywhere he
Oh.
went, I went with him.
Wow.
So I've got footage of that at Plaster City, California, when he took it out to Plaster City, and Durango Silverton, and when we were shooting with Ken Burns and Steve Ives, the PBS series The West,
Oh my.
and I shot video of them shooting that.
Wow.
And that's really, really
That's
cool.
awesome.
And taking the engine back to Eureka to run it right at Eureka. We couldn't run it right on the grade, but Dan went down there and laid a whole bunch of track
Oh,
as
wow.
close to the grade as he could get. Just we would run the engine back and forth and say that he'd taken the engine back to where it used to run in Eureka, Nevada.
That's just crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Just amazing,
Just some
amazing
fun.
stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, there'll be a lot of crazy stuff going forward,
Yeah.
and we'll have a lot of fun with
We
that.
can play that game. Where were you in 1986?
Yeah.
Ah, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. At any rate, if you haven't been over to the channel, pop on over to the channel, and of course you want to subscribe.
Yes.
And you can subscribe by clicking on the blue button, which will be popping in here. Zoing! It's over here, see it? The blue button says subscribe, takes you to the channel, makes you a subscriber, and then you'll be notified of all this and other frivolity and fun as we upload it.
Uh-huh.
Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again next week with some more massive screwing around. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.